Hey, what's up, class? Hope you guys are doing well. I really do miss you guys. I hope you guys are finding ways to stay busy and stuff like that. Still be productive in this crazy time. Just a really quick tidbit, things that have helped me is, sometimes during this time you either feel the rush to be super productive all the time or just decide you're not gonna do anything. That's one of the things I've been struggling with recently. So what I've been doing, or at least trying to do, is find 2 spots in my day for like an hour chunk at a time max where I can be super productive. So I try to be super productive at like 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and then try to be super productive from like 4 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And after that, if I don't get everything that I want to get done in that time frame, then I don't have to beat myself up throughout those other hours of the day. So maybe take that into consideration as you guys go on this journey with us of distance learning. And as always, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know. I apologize for the wind. I apologize if it seems like the video is swaying a bit and stuff, but we do have to get this done. I can't wait to talk a little bit about the belt system. Now, last week's episode, we discussed alternator and battery and briefly alluded to the belt, the Serpentine system on this dune buggy specifically, having some things to do, or possibly having some things to do with an alternator going bad with a loose belt and stuff. So today I'll take you through the difference between some of the frequently seen belts on today's vehicles and how to adjust them, if that's a possibility, how to check them for wear and tear, and then how to replace them. So real quick video, as always, on the distance learning webpage, I'll have a couple of questions. Email me the answers to those questions. That way I know A, you're keeping up with autos, and then B, but most importantly, that you're good, that you're okay. I love hearing from you guys. I like when you guys, share your projects or drive past the house and show me something fun or something like that. Love hearing from you guys. So keep that up. Really do enjoy it. Talking about belts, specifically on the dune buggy here, the dune buggy has what's called a serpentine system, which is one big long belt that just kind of wraps around all the various things that this belt is driving. And that is the most common system that we see in vehicles today. The other system typically is called a V-belt system, and that's a whole other animal. There's a lot of differences between a V-belt system and a serpentine system, so we will get to V-belts eventually, but today we're gonna focus on a serpentine system. Again, just one giant belt that wraps around all the different components that have to be driven off of the power of the engine. A few things that could be driven by a serpentine belt are your alternator, power steering, and water pumps. A couple of those pump type things with internal vanes. Things like your air compressor, your air conditioning compressor are run off of that as well, along with some other things. We'll have some idler pulleys and some tensioners, and I'll talk about all that other stuff later. So when we're taking a look at a serpentine belt, the first thing we want to do is, with the vehicle running, especially when you first start it up when it's cold, you want to see if it squeaks, if it squeals, if it squeaks, if it makes any weird noises like that. That's an indicator that that belt is actually slipping, that instead of turning at the speed of the engine, it's going a little bit slower, and then the pulley has the ability to spin out on the belt, kind of like you're doing a burnout in your car, and you make the tires squeal. Well, the same thing's kind of happening on the belt system in here. So obviously not very good for the tires on your car when you're sitting there burning out, and not very good for the belt itself. It tells you that there could be a lot of things going on. That belt could be wet, or one of the components in the drive system are going bad and producing more drag than normal. But usually what happens is that belt's starting to stretch or wear out. Okay, so I'll show you what that looks like right here. Okay, forgive the shakiness and probably poor sound quality, but here we have the serpentine belt. We can see it right here as it wraps around the alternator and then dives way down throughout all the different channels of this drive system. Okay, and it makes things like the power steering pump to the alternator, the water pump, a tensioner, the crank pulley, which drives it. It links them all together. This belt itself is going bad, and we can see that in a visual inspection. So the belt actually serves the purpose of driving on the underside, in this case where those ribs are, right here, and the back side of the belt, or the top, the smooth part, actually does some driving as well. And we can tell that just by looking at the pulley of the component that's being driven. So on this alternator, we can see the pulley itself has some grooves on it, and the belt has grooves on it, right there. We can see the belt's grooves and the pulley's grooves. Now the belt has to align properly in the grooves of the component that it's driving for it to continue to do its job. And then right below the alternator, way down here, we can see that shiny metal surface is the water pump pulley. So the top side of the belt loops around, and as that belt is spinning, it also turns the pulley of the water pump. So either side of the belt can be a drive side. So we have to inspect both sides of the belt, okay? Most serpentine systems use what's called a tensioner, or a spring-loaded pulley that pulls down and provides a lot of tension on the belt to keep it nice and tight. So in order to take the belt off or replace it, all you have to do is get onto the tensioner and relieve that momentarily to provide enough slack in the belt for it to slip off. But before you do that, take a picture of the belt routing. What I usually do is take a couple of pictures of it, and then I draw it out on a piece of paper. You know, it goes over the alternator, under the water pump, around the crankshaft, all that sort of stuff, so you know exactly how this belt is supposed to go back on. Many setups, many different vehicles have it so that you can actually put the belt on a few different ways, but the tension won't be right, and best case scenario, it squeals a lot. Worst case scenario, you end up chewing up a new belt. So make sure you know exactly how this belt is supposed to be routed when it goes back on. Now, given the nature of a serpentine belt and what its job is, it's certainly possible for that thing to stretch out and wear out over time, to the point where even though that tensioner is applying a lot of pressure on the belt and trying to keep it tight, as that belt continues to stretch, pretty soon it won't have the ability to turn the components fast enough for them to do their job properly. So you'll start to notice things like a lot more squeaking or slipping. A lot of times you'll get an indicator light for your battery if it doesn't have the ability to turn the alternator fast enough to keep up with a charge. You'll start to notice things like possibly your coolant temperature in the car runs a little bit warmer than normal, as that water pump doesn't have the ability to keep up. Sometimes your power steering or your air conditioning could be affected as well. Those are all warning signs that maybe your belt does need to be serviced. Belts can also snap. They're under a lot of load. They have a pretty stressful life. If the wear continues, they can snap and break completely. And then you're in a world of hurt, and you really need to get that serviced ASAP, because your vehicle may still run off of the battery power, but it won't run for long. It will drain the battery out. It will likely start to overheat, as it doesn't have the ability to pump cold coolant through the engine to keep that engine cool. You'll notice it right away because your power steering will likely be gone, that sort of stuff. So it's a really good idea to continue to service these belts and take a look at them and inspect them when necessary. Things we're looking for on a bad belt is frayed edges. If it has any sort of fraying on the edge, that's never a good sign. You're looking for shiny spots, both in the groove side and on the back side of the belt. Any shiny spots in there indicate that that belt is slipping, and it's probably time for a new one, as it's likely stretched beyond its capacity. You're also looking for a lot of cracks. Now, different manufacturers have different specifications for like how many cracks per inch are okay on a serpentine belt system. So make sure you're doing your research on that and looking into what your manufacturer recommends for how many big cracks per inch and that sort of stuff. Also, if it's dry or it feels brittle and you can see little cracks forming on the inside grooves, it's a good sign that, hey, this belt is probably nearing the end of its life. So a quick visual inspection of this without even taking it off lets me know that it's probably time for me to start to replace my belt. I've got a lot of shiny surfaces up here that aren't very consistent. It's really shiny in one spot and then a little bit dull in another, which leads me to believe that it's slipping in that particular spot. There's also an awful lot of play in this belt here. While there is some play that's normal in a belt, if you push down on a bridged portion of the belt or an area where there's not a whole lot of components around, it's more of a stretch part of the belt, you should be able to get a little bit of wiggle in there. It shouldn't be super tight like steel. However, this one I can push down about 3.5 inches, which tells me that either my tensioner is getting really worn, or the more likely culprit is the belt itself. And then again, when I start to look at the grooves of the belt, I can indicate a whole lot of cracks and a whole lot of wear and some shiny portions on the inside of the belt as well. I also have at the school, I have belt checking tools that'll check the depth and the wiggle room with the grooves on the inside of the belt. I get those from Gates Company, and they really help me out with those. Unfortunately, I can't get to them right now, which is fine. I will just go ahead, and once the weather gets a little bit nicer for the dune buggy, I will go ahead and replace this belt system so that we can keep this thing running in tip-top shape. So class, kind of wrapping some things up, we've identified some of the indicators that you have a bad belt or possibly want to look into that belt. If you do decide to go ahead and undertake the task of changing out a Serpentine belt, a couple of pointers for you. Number one, take the picture. I know a lot of vehicles have a routing diagram on the inside of the hood for the Serpentine system. Not a bad idea to still take a picture, maybe even draw it out really quickly, a little map of how things go. It's going to save you a ton of time putting it back on. Number two, be careful of the tensioner. Make sure whatever you use, if you use an open end wrench, if you're lucky enough to get a ratchet in there, sometimes they make special tools for that tensioner depending on your make and model. Make sure you're on that thing really good. It's a pretty high tensile strength spring, and if you have your fingers in there in the wrong spot and something lets loose, it's a real pinch hazard. I've had it done to me before. It sucks. Okay, don't get your fingers pinched on that thing. It doesn't make for a good day. Just be safe on that. Be smart on that. Make sure you're taking a look at your belts regularly so that you don't end up in traffic or on a freeway or out in the middle of nowhere and have a belt let loose, because that's not a great thing either. When you're putting the belt on, when you're putting the new belt on or putting the old belt back on after you've inspected it, make sure you align all the grooves properly. All of the grooves and the pulleys on that system should align properly in that belt. Otherwise, you'll have some misdirection. It'll wear the belt out. It could wear the bearings of the component out as well. So make sure you're really taking your time and putting that on properly. That's about it. That's about all I have for you guys now. When the weather gets a little nicer and I get the new belt in, I'll take you guys through exactly how I replace a belt, the steps that I go through, that sort of stuff. But until then, thanks for watching, guys. I really hope you're safe. I hope you're healthy and happy and making the best of this situation. I know it's not great. It's not where I want to be. For some of you, it may be where you want to be. Some of you, maybe you want to get back to school. Let's just make the most of it, make the best of the situation that we're in. And as always, if there's anything I can do, just email me, man. It's hawnb@mcfsd.org. I'm around my phone 24/7, so if you need anything, hit me up on there and I'll take care of you. Can't wait to see you guys as soon as I can, and look for my video next week.